Sleeper teams are on the docket tonight. I've asked the panel. I don't care if they're AFC or NFC or equitably between both. We're going to go over NFL franchises that, depending on where their over/under is at, who we think is going to far exceed that. So, teams that could either slip into the playoffs or merely perform better than their win-loss. So, if you're high on the Cardinals, their win-loss is only their over/under is only like 4.5, 5.5, something like that. If you think they're going to win 7 games, that can be a sleeper. That's the criteria. And I'm starting with Wes tonight. We got 4 teams per piece. We probably will double up. We didn't screen these together beforehand, but that's all right. Wes, hit me with your first one. It doesn't matter any order you want to.
First one I have are the Washington Commanders. They are sitting at 6.5 wins projected on the season. I feel that they can increase that amount, at least hit the 7, if not push that to 8, possibly 9 wins in this upcoming season. This is a team that's led by their defense. Last year, they averaged 20.7 points against, which was 7th best in the league. They added 2 rookies in the first and second round to help out that secondary. And Chase Young is a year further removed from tearing up his knee. On the offensive side, they bring in Eric Bieniemy from Kansas City, and he should help transform that offense. That offense is going to be built around Sam Howell, second-year player out of North Carolina, who a lot of people were high on coming out. They knew he needed some polish, but he was able to do some things with some weapons at North Carolina, and Washington does have weapons that he should be able to utilize. They do play in the NFC East, which is not going to be an easy go of it. And then they match up against the AFC East and NFC West this year. But I do believe that the Commanders should be able to improve on the 6.5 projected wins for them.
And then are we talking 8-9 or 9-8 or even better?
I would say 8 and 9 would be realistic for them.
And that would be pretty damn spiffy with Sam Howell in the saddle, because that will mean that he's on the right path, assuming they're not just gangbusters on defense. And that sounds about the right forecast for a Ron Rivera team, because they're rarely in the basement. He usually is pretty prideful. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. Jason, who's your first sleeper?
I'm gonna agree with Wes. I gotta throw Washington in there for all the reasons that you outlined, but one more.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Snyder is no longer there.
Yeah.
That is, I think, gonna be huge. They got a new ownership group in place, and I think that that's going to enable them to at least finally put those dark decades behind them. Let's face it, that's exactly what they were. So, and I'm not sure if the NFC East is going to be as tough as everybody says. Maybe it is, maybe it won't. But I do like, and yeah, like you said, if Sam Howell can be productive and he meshes really well with Bieniemy, that's it could be special. Now it could go the complete opposite way too, because Bieniemy, let's face it, everybody's always wondering how good that guy really is, or is it just Reed and Mahomes? So I'm excited to see it. I can't wait.
My first sleeper is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's because their over/under is 8.5 wins, and we already know they're going to win 9 games because Mike Tomlin is incapable of going 8-9 or worse. So I have the Steelers there. I really close your ears, Cody. Enjoyed what I saw from Kenny Pickett last year. The old eye test. Every time I saw him, I was like, this guy's getting better by the week, and he's a rookie. And so I believe with his growth, another year removed from Roethlisberger, and then Mike Tomlin's immediate and guaranteed credo to go 9-8 or better, I do like them to finish about 10-7, which could plop them in the postseason. But I'll give my weekly speech now about the AFC North. I hate trying to figure out wins and losses in that division because I think every team's going to make the playoffs and they really can't. I mean, I guess they could, but they can't. One of those teams won't be as good as we expect. And when we look up, it'll probably be 2 teams are bad because that's how it usually goes. But I really like what the Steelers have done this offseason. Their draft was phenomenal. Tomlin is 16 years, 17 years removed now, a former Vikings coach, and I will always hold him near and dear to my heart. So I have the Steelers going at least 10-7, nibbling at a wild card with Kenny Pickett trending up and a sleeper team. Cody, who's your first one?
Sweet. Well, first off, I want to go ahead and agree with both of the other guys about the Commanders. Just I want to put in that I have off of Warren Sharp's website teams that have a significant advantage in rest days versus their opponents, and Washington's one of those teams.
Where are the Vikings on that? In the middle?
Yeah, nothing special.
Okay.
I don't have their name on here anywhere.
What stat did you just throw out?
It's Warren Sharp's rating for their rest days. So I actually have a summarization just in case you asked that.
Yeah, man.
So I actually have it with the 49ers, who I'll cover later. But it's the 49ers have 20 fewer days of rest than their opponents. Last year, 3 teams had net rest edges of -10 days or worse. And that was the Packers with -12, Patriots -10, and the Texans with -10. All 3 fell below their expected win total. Teams with a net rest advantage with 3 or more days went 32-24-1, 57% win rate, and covered the spread at a 54% rate. The 2 teams with the best net rest edges last year, the Bills with +12 and the Lions with +11, went over their win totals. And so that was only with +12 and +11, which was already considered a lot. Now you're getting more teams that are having even crazier. So like the 49ers have 20 fewer days of rest, which is huge considering last year the biggest was like 12 or 11. That's a whole nother week less of rest than they get with their opponents. A few other interesting ones. The Chiefs were way down there at negative rest advantage. And when you combine this with strength of schedule, it just really seems like it's damning before you even start the season, kind of like with the Chiefs. And then you got the Jets, who are on the other side of the spectrum. They got 12 more days of rest, which really has me kind of hopping on a Jets bandwagon here. Let's see. Commanders also have 12 more days of rest, which is significant. So I'm definitely expecting the Commanders to obviously not just off of that, but they have a mediocre strength of schedule. The defense was top 7 in points.
So you said the Niners had 20 fewer days.
Yep, worse than the league.
And so does this mean that more rest equals better play or less rest equals better play?
More rest, more wins, right?
More rest is better play. So now
with the exception of the Niners, of course.
Well, no, this is just this next season. So basically, this is telling us that whatever Vegas's projected win totals, because coincidentally, that's what we're working with here. Also, what Warren Sharp uses, but I mean, they're sitting at 10.5 on this website. So with 20 fewer days of rest, I mean, they're going to be the litmus test this season. Obviously, all the stats I listed earlier, whenever I started explaining this, all favor it being accurate. Next year, we're really going to see like, hey, with 20 fewer days of rest, is that going to be any different? Because this whole days of rest thing that's been growing has only really started recently, like getting up above a dozen.
And that's just rest days put in place by like the coaching staff and said, hey, let's take this day off. Or is that what that means? Or is that like
travel, right?
Yeah, it's based on primetime games, travel games,
everything,
distance traveled, like all that good stuff. But to go on to also to parlay off of what you said, Dustin, with the Steelers, I was whenever I was making my notes for this, I went and put each coach's record throughout the years with their teams, and it has like their ranks and their defensive ranks. And I was actually kind of surprised that John Harbaugh, just like with Mike Tomlin, although just a little bit different, he went 5-11 1 year in his 15 years. Other than that, never had less than 8 losses, or less than 8 wins.
Okay.
So if you think about it, besides that one 5-11 season where Joe Flacco was crud, he he's kind of
He's right
the
there.
same ilk, but he has an MVP quarterback, and last year they were third in points on defense and also ninth in yards. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is also a 19th ranked in points and 16th ranked in yards on offense. If they do take a step forward on offense and some of those injuries play the right way, man, just last week I was saying the Ravens might miss the playoffs. And now I'm all over here, just like you're talking about. You can never find out who's going to get the wins this week. I'm saying the Ravens are going to get over 10 and a half wins. I think they're going to take that division. Somehow the Steelers are going to have 8 wins again, but they're going to be fourth in their division, maybe. I mean, just like you were touching on, that division is just insane. I expect the Browns to take a leap forward.
Mm-hmm.
Bengals, Ravens. I mean, this one might just come down to injuries.
And the Ravens are your first sleeper. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got
Okay.
Lamar Jackson, former MVP, playing full force. I think they'll get over 10 and a half for sure.
I think, and I got a couple months left yet, I think that they're going to be my Super Bowl pick. I think I've settled on them. I know the defense is there. They finally got with the times and got him some pass catchers. And we know that the Chiefs just can't repeat. That's not allowed. The Eagles probably won't be as good as everyone thinks because that's just the way it goes for the Super Bowl hangover, runner-up hangover. So I think right now I'm settling on the Ravens to win the Super Bowl.
Man, if I pick the 49ers again, I think that's going to make me kind of questionable as a fan. But I was just thinking the other day, I was like, man, Chargers 49ers sure does sound kind of nice.
The Chargers are never going to the Super Bowl with
That's what I tell myself every time I think that. I'm like, they could go to the Super Bowl, and then there's a little part inside of me that's like, no.
It's the AFC version of the Vikings.
Yeah.
Well, way worse than that, though. I mean, the Chargers are a constant letdown.
Yeah, at least in terms of like, well, hopefully they don't screw this up. And you look up and they're screwing this up, aren't they? That's kind of how the Chargers and Vikings are linked at the hip.
Doesn't matter the coaches, doesn't matter the quarterback.
No, that Chargers Vikings Super Bowl would be very fun.
We'll take
leading
that.
up to all the memes you'd see, and the whole time everybody's just waiting like.
Oh, yeah, it would be guaranteed to be a comedy of errors in the fourth quarter, no matter how well the teams played in the first 3 quarters. All right, Wes, who is your second sleeper?
Second one, I will go to the AFC West and prop up Jason over here with the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos are projected at 8.5 points or 8.5 wins for the season. Last season, the defense was average, finished 14th in the league in points surrendered, and the offense was horrendous. In comes Sean Payton, who has championship pedigree and offensive pedigree to boot, and I believe he's going to help right this ship. He's going to fix whatever wrongs went on with Russell Wilson last year. He'll get this offense in line and keep it moving, which will ultimately help the defense out. I do believe that the inefficiencies of the offense kind of doomed that defensive unit. They have a new old defense coordinator in Vance Joseph, who should provide balance and, return this defensive team to the unit that they have been over the last few years. They do also have a favorable end of season schedule. They host the Browns. They're at the Texans, at the Chargers, at Detroit, home against New England, home against the Chargers, and then finally at Vegas. I could easily see them going 5-2, 6-1 over that last stretch. So to beat that 8.5, they'd only need to win 3 games in the earlier part of the season, which I feel is well within their wheelhouse. So I have the Broncos as my secondary team.
I am going to add them. They are my other AFC sleeper. And the only thing I'll add kind of is echoing what you said. So I refuse to believe that Russell Wilson was lucky for 10 straight years. It doesn't make sense to me that he would nibble that MVP trophies for 10 years because Pete Carroll was just doing all of the Wizard of Oz strings behind. It just doesn't make sense. And even if that's true, there's a mindset or there's a school of thought that says Sean Payton's a better coach than Pete Carroll. So then you're finally getting an offense coach. And if it was Pete Carroll, the puppet master all along, bada bing, you got your new puppet master. Therefore, Wilson has to be restored to form or at least some reasonable facsimile. So I have them exceeding the 8.5, probably about 10-7 with a wild card playoff berth behind the Chiefs in that division. You're up, Jason. Either a Broncos speech or your next sleeper or both.
I don't have much. Well, Broncos were on there too for me. I'm not going to add a whole lot more to what you guys said, but yeah, I mean, it's the thing I'm looking the most forward to is that for the last 7 years, we've watched a comedy of errors, regardless of the coach, regardless of the quarterback, regardless of who's on that team. Much like Washington's situation, we have been plagued with no owner for the last 7 years of football. And during that time, they have tried to pigeonhole first-time coaches into this and try to basically raise this team, if you will. A lot of the guys on the team are not young anymore. I mean, they've kind of grown up losing, and there's really been no accountability there. And obviously, how can you have that when there's no owner? So I think what I like the most about the situation is we finally do have a new ownership group in place. It seems to be a competent one at that. And Sean Payton, I'm going to know right away, right? Within the first half of football, if that team trots out there and does anything remotely close to what they've done over the past 7 years, Sean Payton will bench them. And that includes Russell Wilson. I mean, he will not tolerate.
And they got a stud in Jarrett Stidham behind him.
Well, and that's what I'm
underrated.
saying. Hey, Sean Payton ain't going to be afraid to put him in there.
Yeah, paid him good money.
Even Drew Brees. I mean, why don't you have a seat for a little bit? Let's get Taysom some touches. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's similar to that. He won't tolerate it, I don't think. And that's going to be refreshing. I mean, you miss a block, you miss a catch. I'm sure there's finally accountability there. So, but anyway, so that's one of them. I'm just going to go right into my third one here with the Cleveland Browns.
Okay.
Stay in the NFC North. And I don't have a whole lot to say about these guys either, other than the fact that I think Deshaun Watson is going to be better. And this team should be better. They got the talent. They got veteran leadership in Armani Cooper. Nick Chubb is still there. At the skill level positions, they may be getting older, but I think they still got some in the tank. I think they're great. They're both a great presence to help guide Deshaun. And my sleeper in the NFC North is the Cleveland Browns.
AFC North.
Yep.
When you brought up the fact that they haven't had an owner since 7 years, let me ask you this, Jason Bolin. Did your uncle Bolin, did he die right around that Super Bowl?
It was right around there. Yeah. I mean, okay. He was battling in the latter stages of Alzheimer's, which, I've in my own personal life have dealt with, and that's obviously tragic. But yes. So right around that time, and then, then they got passed on to the trust. And then so you had egos. You had Elway there, who was appearing to be the one in charge. Only now it's coming out that, it was Joe Ellis that said, no, you can't hire Kyle Shanahan. Mm-hmm. Right. And because of the grudge that he had with Mike Shanahan. So Joe Ellis, this guy who never made himself public, because that was Elway's job, is the one that put the kibosh on that. So obviously had more power than Elway did. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so that had to have been just so difficult to manage from the upper levels of that organization. I would assume everybody else in the building saw that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, and then the battle between the Bolin family, as far as, they couldn't even agree on one of them taking it over. So it's a difficult situation, but those days are behind us. It seems to be a competent ownership group now. And hopefully they'll live up to Pat Bolin's legacy for sure.
Puppet Masters indeed, Mr. Ellis.
Yeah. Yes. And he
All
just
right.
looks like a snake too.
Yeah.
Ellis does.
So I think we're to your second one, Cody.
Yep. So let me preface this with saying that out of the AFC East, I have the Jets and the Dolphins making the playoffs, not the Bills or the Patriots.
Really?
Yep. We'll cover that on another day. As for this one, I have
Whole
the
show.
Jets over 9.5. I think that they're going to win this division. Their strength of schedule kind of sucks at 26. For what it's worth, I do think that strength of schedule needs context. So maybe with like the order you play teams, the order you have primetime games, the order you have, so many away games in a row, things like that matters in strength of schedule. Maybe not so much like previous years records because a player maybe doesn't play for a certain team anymore, yada yada yada. So even though the 26th ranking for strength of schedule is the worst thing about the Jets, everything else looks pretty great. You got last year they were fourth in both points and yards on defense. They were 29th in points and 25th on yards, but I mean their quarterback situation was atrocious with Mike White and Zach Wilson. But this is also a team on the positive side on the rest ratio. They have 12 more days rest, one of the best in the league. And long has the NFL hoped that a great quarterback was going to go to a marketplace like New York. They got their wish whenever they got Aaron Rodgers. Suddenly, they got the 12 days of rest. This might be one of those scenarios where the league is kind of favoring the Jets and want them to kind of become a story with Aaron Rodgers. So I could see them going over that 9.5 total because of that. Let's see. Also, part of my notes, they play 5 games with more rest than their opponent. They get a bye week ahead of playing the Giants in week 8. Luckily for the Jets, that game counts as a road game despite them playing at their home stadium. And then from October 5th through November 12th, the Jets do not even leave New York. They also have an advantage in key divisional games, which could ultimately make a difference in who wins the AFC East. The Jets don't have a single rest disadvantage in any of the games they play in their division. I mean, everything's just setting up for Aaron Rodgers I don't think that he would necessarily have to play at an MVP level to take the Jets to win this division. This might possibly be the best hope he's had on a team in at least a decade. You get just a little bit of improvement. These Jets are going to be a power to reckon with.
So listen to this. I was writing an article on Vikings territory about where DeAndre Hopkins might end up. And the reason I wrote it is because he and Dalvin Cook want to team up. And so I looked at teams that can afford both of them that are also contending for Super Bowl. Listen to this depth at wide receiver for the New York Jets. Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Mecole Hardman, Denzel Mims, Randall Cobb, Corey Davis. So, I mean, that's not like the greatest wide receiving group that you could ever put on paper, but there's so many dudes like, first of all, like one of them might even get cut before roster trim downs. And then if they keep 6, it really doesn't matter if 2 or 3 guys get hurt because Rodgers, if he's 2021 Rodgers, he can maximize any version of those 6 and especially Garrett Wilson. And you'll be hard pressed to find that much depth at wide receiver on any team. And for Rodgers' sake, I can actually get excited for him now because he's going to play for the Packers. That's kind of cool that he'll have that. He had quite the opposite after Devontae Adams.
Yeah, they're super insulated at wide receivers. It seems like if any of them went down at either of the positions that they work at, they have someone who could come in and step up. So like Allen Lazard is going to be a starter in 2 wide receiver sets. You got Corey Davis behind him. And then you got Garrett Wilson and Mecole Hardman. And then you got Randall Cobb. I forgot the other guy you named. But they also have that at running back as well, which I do want to bring up. I was kind of mentioning to you guys that Dalvin Cook might be going to the Jets, and I saw my first rumor about it today.
Yeah.
So,
do they still have?
I got that from someone else, to be fair, but
they still got Denzel Mims.
Yeah.
Yes, Denzel Mims. I think that dude's gonna get cut. I mean, there's just not enough room for him.
I liked him in the draft.
The Jets getting Dalvin Cook, I mean, they would completely smash this over. I do think that he's kind of showing up a little washed in some advanced metrics. But if you were to just get him on a 1-year deal, give him good money for this year, and then that way you can ease Breece Hall back in, that'd be great. But I know I've been pushing the under on Breece Hall's 885 rushing yards. If we think he's going to get that or not, I don't think he's going to get it. And if you're looking at him not even getting 800 yards, you're going to roll out there with Michael Carter and Israel Abanikanda. Then we're talking about trouble for Aaron Rodgers possibly.
So Dalvin Cook said that he would enjoy playing DeAndre Hopkins, and it sounds like they've talked off air about maybe teaming up. It feels like an NBA talking point, but for teams, for curious minds, there's really only about 3 teams that have enough money that are conceivably contending for a Super Bowl, and that would be the Jets, the Cowboys, and the Browns. If you got creative, you could throw the Patriots in there, but I don't know if they're contending for a Super Bowl. But the Browns probably make the most sense if this duo thing is real, because DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson are pals, and then Dalvin Cook play with Kevin Stefanski in 2017.
That needs to happen.
So yeah, if they teamed up like we're in the NBA, that would be the spot to go, because they have the cap space somehow, and then they have the connections, so to speak.
You gotta tag that.
That makes too much sense now that you say that, for that not to happen.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, I haven't even heard that at this point. That's a good little piece right there.
Yeah, and I stumbled into it because you start by sorting by salary cap space, and then you ask yourself, right, who's the contender? And you're like, yeah, Cowboys. And you're like, Browns, yeah, they can get freaky and do the thing. And then the Jets, of course, because Rodgers there. And then so I get down to the section of my article about the Browns, and I'm like, all right, what are the connections here? Oh boy, we got a couple. And so I typed it into existence.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Wes, your third. We're halfway there.
All right, my third. I'm gonna kind of ad lib a little bit here. I had chose actually 2 teams to see an increase, 2 to see a decrease.
So you had sleeper bad?
Sleeper bad, yeah. I was looking for teams that I didn't think would meet the median or would exceed the median. But I can still do this on the fly. So the third team I'm going to pump in there is my Minnesota fucking Vikings.
Oh.
They got the over under at 8.5 wins on the season, which is a travesty.
Every year they do that.
This is a 13-win team last year. Granted, 11 of those wins were 1-score games, and there's going to be some regression in that stat. I don't see a 5-win regression in that stat. This division still isn't that great. I know Detroit is on the rise, but it remains to be seen whether they can get this done. I don't think Green Bay is going to be the team of years past. We get to see the NFC South, which has got a few teams. I actually think the NFC South is going to be sneaky good, but I do think that there are a few teams in that division that have the potential to be bad, especially earlier in the year. So for the Vikings, they added Brian Flores, who everywhere he's gone as a defensive coordinator has made an impact and made his mark. He's improved that unit that's usually porous the year prior, and made very good improvements in the standings in advanced metrics. And that was the downfall for the Vikings last year. Ed Donatel did not know what he was doing. That defense was horrendous. It was the second year in a row where it was just terrible. This defense we're going to roll out is going to be an attacking one. It's going to keep us in games. And then we haven't even gotten to the offense. Our offense was lights out last year. We add Jordan Addison, who's going to see one-on-one coverage while Justin Jefferson gets double covered. And that's not even talking about TJ Hawkinson, who's going to be working, the big slot. I don't see this team winning any less than 9 games.
And are you tentatively, you still got a training camp and a preseason to see? Are you thinking 10-7, 11-6?
I would say 11-6 is fair.
Yeah, I think I'm at 10-7 now, but I'm hoping to talk myself into 11-6 by the start of the regular season. I've tried to figure this out for the last 4 off seasons. I look down at these wins over unders, and it's the same bullshit every year for the Vikings. 8.5 wins. Now the bullshit was correct in 2020 and 2021, and I asked myself, why has this always happened? And I settled on the one constant is the quarterback. I think odds makers look down at the page, they look QB1, they scroll down with their index finger, they go, oh, Kirk Cousins, 8.5 wins, baby. And that's how they do it, because it's every year that they have the same forecast. It just so happened last year that they were gangbusters situational football and rattled off those 13 wins that Wes mentioned. So I have a terrible segue here because I have the Packers as my next sleeper team. Not because I think they're going to win the Super Bowl or even really be better than the Rodgers era. I just, for the life of me, can't understand. Maybe it's because of I've seen too much in 34 years of football fandom, that I think it's way too premature to think, oh, Packers suck because they don't have Aaron Rodgers. I got to see Jordan Love suck before he actually, I believe it with my own two eyes. So I think that the Packers right now are supposed to be vying for third or fourth place in the NFC North. And it's so foreign to me that I must say that 7.5 wins for me at this point for them feels low. And it's probably because I'm paranoid that they're just going to be good all over again. I will call out one thing to you gentlemen that I hadn't even thought of. Thor Nystrom was on my Vikes Now show 2 days ago. And he came up with the thing that keeps him up at night, ardent Viking fan, is that the Packers they suck too much. And they're 3-14. They get the first overall pick or second overall pick. And then, by the way, they also will own the Jets' first pick. And if the Jets happen to be upside down, then they're going to have 2 delicious picks, and they will be fully equipped to get Caleb Williams or Drake May. So if you're a Viking fan, you want the Packers to struggle, but only to the tune of about 7-10 or so, because if they get down below 5-12, then they're going to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, and it would be a very Packer thing to just take a year off and get like the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. So in spite of all that, I still think the Packers are kind of in the ballpark, nibbling at 9-8, 10-7, because I just refuse to believe that all of a sudden, like Rodgers didn't even play good last year, and they still were knocking on the door of the postseason before the Lions said, So I have, regrettably, sorry to all Vikings fans listening, I have the Packers as a sleeper team. Let's see. Jason did his number 3 with the Browns. That brings us to, let's see, Cody, your third one, correct?
Yep.
All right, let's have it.
Interesting notes on the Packers. You're sending me on a roller coaster of emotions.
That's what Thor did to me.
Yeah. And Thor Nystrom, what an awesome guest to have on your show. I actually follow a lot of his fantasy football work.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah.
All right. So let me jump way back to who I mentioned earlier with the 49ers. Their over-under is at 10.5. Their strength of schedule is 5th. So, I mean, it's easy peasy. The one thing working against them this season is that 20 fewer days of rest. That'll be interesting to see how that plays apart.
Maybe those will just balance each other. Easy schedule versus bad
exactly.
rest.
So you give a team that's loaded like this, just a neutral script like that. I mean, let's look at defense. Their points and yards were both first in the league last year. They were 6th and 5th on offense. That was with 3 different quarterbacks, a tsunami in Chicago. I mean, their season was just so interesting. It still came out to 13-4. The 49ers, they get to play the Cardinals the next year. They've kind of been bullying the Seahawks, although I also expect the Seahawks to make the playoffs as well. Out of this division, by the way, I have the 49ers and the Seahawks going to the playoffs. But against the Rams and the Cardinals, there's no reason for them not to have 4 wins right there. I think the 49ers, I don't know about Trey Lance at this point, but I am a 49er Kyle Shanahan believer. Hopefully Trey Lance shows out. We had that report that come out today saying Brock Purdy, from Adam Schefter, saying Brock Purdy is going to be the number 1 if he's healthy. And then number 2, Sam Darnold has the edge there. So obviously that made me panic a little bit, because y'all know how big of a Trey Lance truther I am. And there's rumors he might be the number 3 quarterback. There's also rumors that his throwing motion's renewed. Either way, no matter which of those quarterbacks start, even Sam Darnold, I think they hit 10.5 wins. Sam Darnold could start half that season. I think they hit 10.5 wins.
Are they gonna be your Super Bowl pick, or too early to say? Or Super Bowl to get there anyhow?
Right now they're gonna be my Super Bowl pick, but I'm hoping that some other team changes that. But I mean, that just, to me, in the NFC, the 49ers are the team to chase. I think they would have had a chance against the Eagles. I think it's possible for the Eagles to take a slight step back. And I don't see anybody else coming from the NFC to take it from the 49ers. So, yeah, right now the 49ers are my Super Bowl pick. They definitely clear 10.5.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with because I want to go against the grain. Usually gets me in trouble. Like last year, we're not going to talk about it for picking a unsung Super Bowl runner-up. And if you say, well, I'm not picking the Eagles, I'm not picking the Niners because those teams are just fresh in my memory of doing really good. That leaves you with the Cowboys. That leaves you with the Vikings being for real, as Wes talked about with the defense. That leaves you with Seattle really being sneaky, overachieving good. And then I don't even know if you could pick a team from the NFC South to be that good to get to the Super Bowl. So your options are limited if you refuse to pick the Niners and Eagles, which is really good news for the Niners and Eagles. So yeah, we all still have about 2.5 months to figure out Super Bowl predictions because we will offer them on this very show. But Cody is high on the 49ers. He is eternally high on the 49ers, even if Trey Lance isn't getting the love, which is interesting note because you think that would piss him off.
Yeah, and I believe there was a show last year where I guess we were really bored, probably around this time of the year, and I think we talked about very briefly Kyle Shanahan possibly coming to the Vikings. Oh, I guess it wasn't this time of year, but a little.
I remember exactly what it was.
Yeah. Before we hired our coach,
it was early November of 2021 because they were like, I want to say, what was it, Wes? Like 3-5 or some shit like that.
Yeah,
4-5, and they weren't going in the right direction. And then, of course, they had a really pivotal game against the Vikings that Wes and I were at. And I told Wes going to that game on a bus, so whoever wins this game is going to the playoffs. And it was the Niners, of course. That was the game where Cousins lined up under the right guard.
Yeah, and obviously
such a Cousins thing to do.
Yeah, right. And obviously, like, they're. Oh, let me start this over. That is like a multiverse moment to where things crack, and in another universe right now, Kyle Shanahan is our coach, and who knows? But it's crazy to think that you have 3 quarterbacks in San Francisco this year who could all potentially win a Super Bowl, but all potentially not even be there next year because, like Kirk Cousins or something like that. San Francisco is just so interesting.
Yeah, it's really, I challenge anybody watching, listening, or any of yas that there is no other team in football where you can say, hey, who gives a shit who the quarterback is? They'll be fine. There is no other team. Like usually if a starter goes down, you're like, oh my God, the season's over. With the Niners, it's like, we don't really care. We do this all the time. And no other team is like that. I don't even really know if other teams have been like that recently. Maybe back in the black and blue era of football when you could just hand it to the running back all the time. It really wouldn't matter who the quarterback is. But it's really, really, really weird that we're like, well, Purdy, Darnold, Lance, they're going to probably get Kirk Cousins next year in free agency. And it's all the same thing. They're going to get the NFC Championship.
Yeah. So much quarterback questions. Doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Yeah. Think about if this was the Broncos, Jason. You're like, well, we got Trey Lance, we got Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold. It doesn't really matter because they're all going to do the same. It wouldn't even make sense because the way that we do things now in the NFL, especially the way the media drives it, it's quarterback versus quarterback. And for the Niners, it's Kyle Shanahan versus the other team's quarterback.
Well, that's just it. It's no wonder that more teams, organizations don't attempt to do whatever it takes to trade for that guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
true.
I would trade innumerable amounts for him just to come and coach. I mean, and then it could be, you see it all the time with quarterbacks. I think that a person like that is much, much more important than the quarterback, and he's proven it.
Yeah. And always remember in the last, 4 seasons, the one time he had a healthy quarterback, they got to the Super Bowl, and I will argue they were one pass away from putting the Chiefs to bed. And of course, that guy didn't make the pass. Jimmy Garoppolo, who plays for the Raiders now. But this happens. This is why I'm convinced that Kirk Cousins is going to go to the 49ers next free agency, because all they need is a durable quarterback who's good. He doesn't need to be great. He needs to be good. He needs to be on the field. That is Kirk Cousins' biography. That'll be Kirk Cousins' obituary. Both of those items is that he was good and he was durable, and that's about it. And They can't get that in San Francisco. They get flashes of good from some of these dudes, and boom, this guy's hurt, and the next guy's hurt, and they don't even have enough quarterbacks to finish the championship game. It's like, really? Yeah, they need Kirk Cousins, and if the Vikings let him walk, I guarantee you he's going to the 49ers.
Yeah. Do you think that there's quarterbacks in the league that, like, whether they're drafted or maybe on the market, free agent, whatever the case, do you think that they have the same outlook on Kyle Shanahan as what we just described? Do you think that they think to themselves, man, I would love to be coached by that guy?
Yeah, I think when Baker Mayfield was let go by the Panthers, right?
Yeah.
I want to say that there was some smoke or some steam that said he wanted to go to the 49ers, which would have worked because they needed a healthy human in the NFC Championship. And then, by the way, he won that Monday Night Football game with like glancing at the playbook for a couple minutes before the game. So I'm convinced that if he would have went there, the NFC Championship could have been a little bit different.
Wow. Yeah, that's another one of those alternate universe
Butterfly
things.
effect. Yeah.
Yep. And we can't gush about the 49ers without me giving a shout out to Brandon Ayuk. Predicted him to break out last year. He had 1,000 yards without his BFF and Trey Lance. I think that he's going to clear 1,000 yards this year. I don't think Deebo Samuel's in it. And Brandon Ayuk, I mean, he is a sleeping monster. Super underrated on Underdog. His season-long prop is 775 yards. He was 20 short of that in his worst year as a rookie when he was in that doghouse. So, I mean, like, that's free money. Everybody sleeps on.
Did
Brandon
you see
Ayuk.
the Spielman clip last week talking about him?
No, I did not.
Oh, he was the contingency plan. If Jefferson was taken by the Eagles or somebody else, it was Ayuk who they were going to get.
He's so good. If he was on another team, he might even be putting up better numbers than 2,600 yards in 3 years with half of that in half of the first season in the doghouse.
Yeah.
He's good. And he's going to hit free agency possibly with Deebo already being locked up. CMC, George Kittle. I mean,
they can't afford all these dudes.
Yeah, this guy's going to be a stud next season.
All right, West, your final sleeper team, no matter which way you want to go, whether that's too many losses or getting too many wins, who do you got?
I'll just touch on the Eagles were one of my too many. I think they're projected a little too high on win-loss. When Cody mentioned them kind of regressing, that they're definitely a regression candidate for me. But I will stick to the script here, and I will give you an NFC dark horse Super Bowl contender.
This will be good.
And I hope you're ready for it. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, the Carolina Panthers, they're predicted 7.5 wins.
Adam
This
Thielen
is a
homer.
team. Hey, this is not an Adam Thielen thing. This is a young up-and-coming team. I think they are held back by their previous head coach. Made some really, really bonehead decisions and plays. I think this defense has what it takes. They have the youth at all three levels to be able to help carry this team. They're gonna run out Miles Sanders to be their every down back, and I think they're gonna ground and pound. You're gonna see Steph Curry pounding that drum on the sideline, pound on for the Carolina Panthers. They go up against the NFC North. They go up against the AFC South. That AFC South is horrendous. So that's 4 wins right there. I'm marking them down for 4 wins against the AFC South. They'll probably split their division, and then they need to get 1 or 2 wins against the NFC North. That'll put them right at about 9. And I think that gets them into the playoffs. Their defensive coordinator, they have a young defensive coordinator who they picked up from Denver, Evero. He showed flashes last year in Denver until, as I mentioned before, that offense was so bad that there really wasn't much for that defense to do.
No.
If they're playing, 80% of the game, that defense is going to wear down over time. I think that this team has a nice balance. I think Bryce Young is the type of quarterback, has the type of pedigree to do just enough to not make the mistakes, but also to, carry this team just enough, especially coming from Alabama. This is a team. It's young. It's going to be hungry. Games that I watched them in last year, they seem to be in every game. So I have them as a dark horse. I definitely have them better than the 7.5 wins projected for them.
It sounds like by the time we get to our standings episode or whatever it is, our playoff predictions episode, you're going to talk yourself into them winning the division over the Saints, perhaps.
Over the Falcons. Saints?
He likes the Falcons
What?
too.
Can we get to the standings episode already?
Yeah, no, we're gonna have the Bucks at 11-6 before we know it.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Oh man. I'd
All
love
right.
to segue right here. If
Oh,
I
is it?
could,
Yeah, it's-
possibly. Yeah,
let's see. We get yours.
Panthers might. I think they also could go over 7.5. I don't think they'll win the division though. I do think that two teams from the NFC South will go to the playoffs. Hot take. It's going to be the Falcons and the Panthers. I got the Falcons winning the division. Everything Wes said about the Panthers was great. I'm also a big fan of them. You could flip this really. For me, it just comes down to talent performing on offense. Receivers really got me questionable on both teams, really. I don't think Adam Thielen's washed like the rest of the league does. Both of their strength of schedules are awesome. Falcons are at second. Panthers are at fourth. Both were mediocre in last season offensive and defensive ranks. Both finished 7-10. For me, this comes down to I think Kyle Pitts takes a big step. Bijan Robinson takes a big step. So does that young Falcons defense. And the way their offense is set up, like I've said before, it's going to give the defense some rest by, possessing the ball. You got Bijan Robinson could alleviate some receiver concerns by working out wide because Tyler Algier is a worthy starting running back in the league, especially in that system. Another underdog buy at 480 overall rushing yards. This guy, I mean, they got talent just like Carolina does on both sides of the ball. Like Wes said, the divisions they play against the NFC North and the AFC South, they could be a lot softer than in years past. I think that the Falcons and Panthers are both going to go over their expected. Panthers at 7.5, Falcons at 8.5, and I think they both go to the playoffs.
You're making me nervous because if you like two teams from that division, it sounds like you're really high on the Seahawks. I'm guessing
I don't have the Vikings going to the playoffs.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm nervous about. So we're really going to get to that episode, and you're going to have the Vikings at 8-9 or something.
Yeah, they're going to be right behind. Another hot take. Sneak preview. I only have one team from the NFC East going, and I have two teams from the NFC North. Neither are the Vikings.
Really?
So, at least today,
Yeah, you hated the Ravens, what, 2 weeks ago? 1 week ago?
Yeah, so both the Norths
true.
for me, I've actually been like sitting there in spare time looking at my little Excel spreadsheet, and I have typed out a few teams and typed in a few other teams. The rest of them are completely solid for me. I haven't moved off Falcons and Panthers in a minute. Saints, I think, are a joke. And I think the Cowboys also stagnant. They haven't really done anything to move forward. And for me, especially in today's NFL, if you're not making big steps to move forward, you're taking steps backwards. It's either forwards and backwards. You can't just stay stagnant, can't stay in the middle. That's why the Eagles regressing. You could argue that they made moves, but really they were just reshuffling bodies. Cowboys, I think, were the opposite. I mean, they lost talent in a few places and haven't gotten better, really. But yeah, in conclusion, I got the Falcons winning that division.
Wes, do you think that the Panthers and Falcons are better than the Vikings?
I need to see it. I need to see the tape before I make that decision. Vikings won their division with a terrible defense last year.
Mm-hmm.
They had 13 wins last year with a terrible defense, and granted, some luck was involved on a lot of those one-score games, but you don't do that with a defense as bad as the Vikings team was if you don't have a good head coach and a good offense. And there hasn't been any subtractions to the head coach or to that offense that would knock them down a few rungs. And I think they've added to the defense to it. I mean, the only way for that defense to go is up because they were, I think, 32nd on most lists for defensive rankings, maybe 31st, but yeah, the only way for that defense is to go up. And so with that, even if there's a little regression on offense, I think it balances and they should remain right around the same.
If you were to swap the Saints and the Vikings divisions, and they swap schedules, divisions, all that stuff, I do think the Vikings would win the NFC South. So for me, with context, I don't think the Falcons and Panthers are better than the Vikings. I think the Vikings are just in a tougher situation.
Well, I shall implement peer pressure for the next 2 months to get the Vikings back in the top 7. That'll be my mission statement. Jason, give me your final sleeper team.
Well, with the Vikings, I don't understand how you could think that they'd be any worse. I mean, not only do you add a defensive coordinator that's going to be light years ahead of where you guys were last year, and but you got O'Connell's second year in the system, and you got to imagine that the players on offense fully trust him after what they were able to pull off last year. So they got that going for them too. And I can't believe that none of you guys all seem to be in agreement that the Eagles are going to take a step back. I can't get there. I don't see that. But I have the entire NFC North in there as sleeper teams. None of these teams are predicted double-digit wins. I think that it could be a very exciting division to watch this year, and it could go absolutely either way. But I think the Bears have, they got them at 7.5. I mean, I think they could potentially go over that, assuming that Fields can continue to grow and take that next step. The Lions, they could really go either way too. The thing about this division is each one of these teams, it's not going to surprise me if one of them or two of them get over 10 or 11 wins. And it's not going to surprise me if every one of these teams have 7. And I think that's going to make it exciting because I think they're all capable of doing good things and they're all in a good position, I think, moving forward. But it's just that when you were talking about the Bears and the Lions, those teams haven't been anything for so many years. And the Vikings, can you really trust them? Well, I think it's a different team. And I said that all of last year. They had that awesome comeback win against the Bills in Buffalo. Bad teams don't do that. So, and then the Packers, you get Jordan Love out there. I got to believe that it's going to work until I see it not working. And they got a good coach there with LaFleur. So, I'm really, really excited to watch the NFC North games this year.
My final one is something I mentioned about a month ago is the Los Angeles Rams. I have to go pull it up. What is their puny little total?
What is that?
6.5.
6.5. Yeah. And I know that they don't have the personnel. I know it appears that they're having a transformational year. But Matthew Stafford, he's 6 months older than Cousins. So he's 35 years old. He's been on poor teams for most of his life. And I think the difference will be Sean McVay. I think McVay came back. He's like one of the youngest coaches in the league and almost contemplated retirement if he didn't. But he came back, and I don't think he did that just to go 6-11. I think that he's going to surprise folks and be able to do a lot with a little in terms of talent. And so I think we're counting them out too prematurely. I think they will use the guys on the roster that most of us don't know who they are. And I don't think that they're going to be as horrible because Stafford's been here before. He knows how to at least put a respectable product on the field when you know that team isn't very good in the first place. So because McVay's in charge and Stafford doesn't have a whole lot of years left, and I think he'll want to end on a high note, I think that I'll probably have them in my seventh seed in the NFC playoffs just to really stir the pot. Yep.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if getting rid of some of those stars and kind of making it appear that they're just kind of rebuilding is more beneficial for the situation. Because to your point, McVay, I mean, I got to trust that guy.
Yep, I'll trust him. And they still have Cooper Kupp, who we think will be healthy. And I can't quite figure out why we don't give them the same type of kudos for the head coach that we would the other Titans of industry. We're like, oh, they're going to be 4-13. It's like, you guys love Sean McVay. That's like, your next big thing, that the friend of McVay, the jokes, and we're not
the
doing
McVay
those anymore.
tree.
Yeah, we're not doing those anymore, evidently.
Nope.
All right, gentlemen, that's all we got for tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday. Have a week off after that, and we are about 5 weeks from training camp. So you gentlemen have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you in 1 week.
Good night, guys.
Later.